Powerful necromancer with a dark reputation, the mere sight of Styx incites fear. This nightmarish spectre is accompanied by a pair of slavering abyssal hounds, huge creatures with an insatiable thirst for blood. Styx, Lord of Hounds, is a Shaper champion, and, as with all Shaper champions, centres on the control of the physical battlefield, be that through moving hexes or manipulating positions of players. And Styx champions at moving singular hexes and causing problems for players. His abilities are similar to many other Shapers on a toned down level, but he has a wider range of those available to him. In example, his apparition ability allows him to move a single hex and all contents on it is single hex towards him. He also has the ability to drag enemies towards him as well. He only has one attack, but this allows him to still do massive damage within a one range. And his actual innate ability prevents enemies from moving Styx should he be taken out. The Abyssal Hounds are all about the area control and preventing players from doing things. So they are on much more of a basis of they're in position to prevent players from coming near. Like a guard dog, they're there to prevent players from placing banners on Godtear hexes and ensure that the control of the area is best utilised by your warband. As a snapshot, Styx is not a massively aggressive champion set, and in fact he's actually more defensive in what his abilities actually allow you to do. However, that does not stop him from taking out enemies and being at the forefront of the battle, ensuring that enemies and enemy figures are being pushed, pulled and moved aside to ensure that the rest of your warband is able to do the best that they can in the situations they find themselves in. The main feature of Styx is his ability to do lots. As an example, during the preparation phase, one of his abilities is outright stated as a bonus action, meaning that you get almost, if you were to use it, 3 actions per turn with Styx during that phase. The Hour is Nigh is the ability to give an enemy a burden and remove one of their shields within 2 hexes. On top of this, he's also able to use the Dead Beckoning skill, which, if it is a hit, it moves a target 1 hex towards Styx, allowing him to control that field and pull enemies into a line of fire. He's not the most mobile of characters, but his dodge is high, his health is a nice standard, and he has 2 shield. During the clash phase, he has the apparition move, which is the big hit and the one that you will want Styx for. It allows him to move an entire hex, 1 hex towards Styx, including everything on it, manipulating that battlefield in the most literal sense by changing the positions of those Godtears. And finally, his ability to use an attack is his Scythe Slash, which is simply just a 5 to hit, 5 damage attack, which also reduces the amount of dice that an enemy will roll on their next attack. Perfect for mopping up as necessary, but more importantly, a superb character at ensuring that you've got the battlefield how you want it and controlling the actual physicality of where things are. Compared to other Shaper champions, it does feel, and I will be honest, that he is a lot less of a Shaper and much more of a Shaper cum Slayer. And I'm not saying that because he is a heavy hitter, but more because you will use him more for slaying. His ability to control the field is fantastic, but it only goes so far, and at some point you will need to make him make a hit, and the fact that he is dragging enemies towards him, moving full hexes in his direction, means that you are going to be bringing the danger towards him. So it's worth being aware that you are going to want to give him attack buffs, hit buffs, defense buffs, to ensure that he can last as long as possible, not only so that he can continue to manipulate the field, but also so that he is able to contribute towards those champion and follower kills. The whole aesthetic and theme for Styx is death, with the large scythe and the cloaked robe and the ribs showing across his plate armour. Even being named after the ferryman who would take souls to the afterlife, his entire demeanour screams hell. He has 3-headed dogs at his side, the Abyssal Hounds, which look akin to Cerberus, the keeper of hell itself. On the flip side, however, his totem takes a more jovial and jolly sense, and it actually looks like puppies. A 3-headed puppy on a podium. And I know that the designers like to have a bit of fun with the actual designs for the totems, and I think it does still fit in with his design. But I think when you're comparing these aesthetics, which are relatively strong, to those of champions like Skullbreaker, who has got nothing but a pile of dragon skulls as his totem, if you were going for pure looks, you might want to be looking at a redesign for this totem. Styx on his own looks astounding, an absolute stunner on the table, and he is so incredibly tall, championing even Morrigan on the table in height-wise. And his Abyssal Hounds look fantastic. The only issue I have with the aesthetics with these is that you can only tell them apart because of the direction of the heads, with one hound having two heads facing up and one facing down, and the other having one head facing up and two facing down. So it can be quite easy to misconstrue, confuse, and make mistakes with which one of these is losing health and which isn't. But again, this is a very minor element that can easily be fixed by any player who is quite adept at painting. All in all, I think the aesthetics for Styx are beautiful, and if this was just a fashion competition, he would always be on my warband, regardless to the circumstances. As with Kaelin, because Styx only has 2 followers, both of these followers have 4 health as opposed to the standardised 1. This ensures that you have got a little bit more weight behind them and makes them valuable to have regardless to what you want Styx to do. On top of this, they have some really clever abilities which don't always follow the Shaper mentality, but allow them to really control the battlefield and ensure that enemies are being wary of their positions and even keeping away from them. During the preparation phase, you have the Pack Hunter's ability, which allows each Abyssal Hound within 4 hexes of Styx to move up to 2 hexes on top of their 2 of movement already, making sure that they can really control where things are and where they are on the field. They also have the Howl ability, which allows them to reduce the amount of aim an enemy has on hit. And finally, they have their innate ability, which works across both phases, which is Drag. And at the end of the Abyssal Hound's activation, you can move up to 2 small follower models within 2 hexes of the Abyssal Hounds, 1 hex towards that Abyssal Hound. That is the only element that I find is very Shaper-esque. Everything else feels very aggressive. In the example of the Clash Phase abilities, which is Torn to Shreds, which allows them to, if there were to be a totem between the 2 of them, they can remove that banner. This allows them to control that field even further without needing to be able to go on Godtears. And finally their hit, which is monumental. Triple Bite. This allows them to roll 3 hits instead of 1, and for each hit the skill has 2 extra damage attacks. So you would roll 4 dice 3 times, and that would determine how many strikes you would make. The Abyssal Hounds are incredibly formidable and terrifying on the battlefield. I have had enemies move away physically from them, champions avoid them like the plague. But it is worth noting that despite their healthy health and their fantastic dodge of 4, they only have 1 defense, and a very strong strike from any Slayer champion will take these out. And although it's only worth 1 on the ladder and it is not a massive detriment to your warband plan, it can really open up that battlefield if your Abyssal Hound has been controlling a specific area for a long period of time. My other qualm with this is the Torn to Shreds ability. As superb as it is, it only takes the enemy 1 mistake to recognise where they need to be placing their banners, and it is always away from the edge. Even with Styx moving the hexes, it is rare to get a second banner destruction from the Abyssal Hounds. Those totems and those banners are not going to be disappearing because of these bad boys. If anything, these are the one-time threat that they will use it, and beyond that, everything else is just about that area control and that massive damage that they can do on a good roll. The final thing I want to mention, which I didn't mention for any of the champion focusers because it's sort of tied into everything else, is Styx's super ability, which I think is astounding. It's called the Reaping, and it is an instant knockout of any enemy model within range. You don't award any steps because of it, and you don't gain anything from it, but it is an instant KO, which I think is insane. The fact that Styx is able to, in a pinch, really control that field by just removing a champion entirely for 1 whole round makes him so valuable. He is the fixer for your warband. If you have a problem, it is Styx who is going to fix it. Be that hex placement, be that dodgy enemies in the way, or be that the fact that you have got things out of the way and you need your hounds to control them. Styx is the one to really control that field and fix your problem. Styx, Lord of the Hounds, is the fixer. He will come in on your warband and he will remove problems. He will change positions and he will make your enemy's battle plan a farce. By changing the positions of enemies on the fly in quick succession, by changing the hex placements, and by having those hounds have the potential to remove banners, you are going to be in a position where you are really controlling every element, both physically and in terms of preventing their plan from moving forward. I found that Styx is a superb shaper because he is not just a shaper. You have to use him in a multitude of ways. The hounds have got a heavy attack and he has one too, and it is so worth cashing in on. He is the only champion who is a Shaper who I would say is more akin to a Slayer because of what he can do and the damage he can do. Dragging enemies towards him is a very Shaper-esque thing to do, but doing so to take their head off with his broad scythe is the Slayer element within it. The Hounds again are very, very Shaper-esque in how they can drag enemies towards them, but the fact that they can reduce their statistics and hit relatively hard makes them once again a Slayer. It's very, very obscure in a set because I would advise this as that broad balance between having a Shaper and a Slayer on your team. And because of that, I would not recommend putting him with a combination of Slayer and Shaper, because you will have a very, very heavy set that is controlling areas and taking enemies, but won't gain the benefits from placing banners. One thing I will say about Styx is that he is perfect as a counter to any enemies with large health pools. As an example of Grimgut, if Styx were to see Grimgut as a problem, he can use his super to take him out for a full round. And although he may come back stronger, he is out for that round, and it means that there is going to be less actions the opponent can do. He can then use his other abilities on top, including the one that stands out as a bonus action to control the area in other ways. Giving debuffs, preventing enemies from moving, forcing enemies to move, getting your position in terms of where your dogs are to hit them hard and prevent the enemies from getting closer. Styx is all about that manipulation of the physical terrain and manipulation of the enemy plan to prevent them from doing anything other than panicking. What I will say about Styx is there aren't many good synergies that you can get with him. He's very good at manipulating the field, but he will just add to anybody else who can do that as well. Were you to combine him with Shale, all you would have is a large warband of movement. That said, Shale's actual follower is very big and beefy, but it is a singular unit, meaning that you would be down to 3, and you would need your third member of the warband to have a lot of followers to try and balance that out. Of course, with that as well, were you to try and take him with Mournblade, you would be able to control the field in 2 ways, by having those cold burns freeze the enemies in place, but also have Styx and the Abyssal Hounds drag them and move them as well. And it depends on what sort of game plan you're going for and how you're taking the enemies on. What I will say is that against Slayers, Styx doesn't really do as well as he could, which is why that super ability is so worth to have in your back pocket just in case you do end up against an enemy like Skullbreaker. You don't want to be in a position where you are in a losing fight because you're not using your abilities, but at the same time you don't want to be in a position where Styx is going to waste. He can manipulate that field, but he can hit hard as well, so it's worth having him chase down those minions, those followers, and take them out quick and easy. And because Styx can't be moved after being taken out, it also means that your position is held even longer, because they won't be able to move them those 2 hexes. Styx will stay exactly where he is and be back up in the next round. A fantastic synergy that I have found, which does work incredibly well, is Styx and Lorsan. Because Lorsan is all about that range and that distance, and she does not deal well with close encounters. Of course, Styx can then prevent that by moving enemies backwards and dragging them towards him, or using his Abyssal Hounds to try and bring them towards them instead. It ensures that Lorsan's tiny little hits can really build up very quickly over rounds and take out those enemies. Although Styx's single hit attack isn't the biggest hit, it is quite strong across the actual champions of Shapers that I have encountered, and it is one that I would highly recommend as that balance between a Shaper and a Slayer. If you're looking for a Shaper that can manipulate the battlefield quickly, change enemy positions, prevent damage, and really cause problems for the enemy players, and fix your problems, Styx, Lord of Hounds and Abyssal Hounds is the champion set for you.